So an interesting story came out of Aberdeen, Washington this last week that honestly, I have a lot of difficulty trying to figure out exactly how to look at it. So there's a store there that sells Star Wars merchandise, strictly Star Wars merchandise as I understand it. There's not anything else in the store but Star Wars, so if you're going there, you'd better be a fan. But if you go there, you might not want to be LGBTQ, because apparently the owner has some views, let's just say. Apparently this individual, he had a sign hung up in his shop that basically read, if you were born with a dick, then you're not a chick. So basically, he's not on board with the whole, trans thing, however you want to describe that. And I have to say that I'm really of two minds about the entire thing. Because what wound up happening was that this individual wound up being targeted by a town councilor from Aberdeen, Washington. So one way or the other, however it happened, this sign wound up reaching the attention of an Aberdeen town councilor by the name of Tiesa Meskis. And she wound up going out of her way to basically engineer a confrontation between herself and Mr. Sucher. She made sure that there was somebody there, to record the whole thing. Made sure that the thing wound up being posted on the internet. And so basically what wound up happening is that Mr. Sucher wound up being targeted by a lot of these LGBTQ activists. And really not just by LGBTQ activists. Apparently there were, at some point or another, there were people that were associating themselves with Antifa that were showing up, and declaring their intention to show up at the store and do the things that Antifa does. And if anybody in this video, watching this video is familiar with Antifa, well, they know exactly what it is that Antifa does. And so basically, Mr. Sucher was given reason to fear for his physical well-being and his physical safety, just so that this Tiesa Meskis, could solidify her support in advance of what I understand is a coming election. And so Aberdeen, Washington, for those who are not terribly familiar with the town, it's the place where Kurt Cobain from Nirvana came from. And so anybody who's familiar with Kurt Cobain or Nirvana is probably well aware of something that has been kind of like there has been this, this long-running kind of culture clash within that community. And that was actually one of the things that drove Kurt Cobain to start his band and to go off to Seattle. It's because he didn't like a lot of the deeply rooted, socially conservative, kind of elements of the town's culture. And obviously that's what Mr. Sucher represents in this particular case, and I don't think that's terribly surprising. I mean, he's about 80 years old. He's a Vietnam War veteran. I mean, he's just going to see certain things a certain way, and I think that is obviously reflected in, what was basically, for lack of any other better phrase, just some boomer humor, for lack of any other way to describe it. But there's a few other things that I think need to be mentioned about this. And basically, I think that's one of those cases where, I think I've said this on this podcast before. In fact, I know that I have. It is possible for both sides of something to be wrong. And here's actually a pretty good example of that. Now, I'm not going to say that Tiesa Meskis is wrong to be upset about that particular sign. I mean, I don't like it. My views on the trans issue in particular are a little bit conflicted, but there is one thing that I do believe in. And I believe that people should be treated, as the gender they self-identified as. It doesn't mean that anybody has to believe that they actually are that thing. But I think that people should be treated that way just as a matter of basic courtesy. And so of all the things that a person could say about this Don Sucher, I mean, the one thing that I will definitely say is that, he's not a nice person. Like, that's kind of rude. And the simple fact of the matter is that there's no reason for him to have that sign up in his store. It doesn't have anything to do with his business. I mean, it is his right to express those views if he so chooses. I don't like it, but yes, he does have that right. But I think it's bad business. And I think that it's basically, he invited upon himself, basically an unnecessary shitstorm. But then, of course, on the other side, there was the matter of this unnecessary shitstorm. If T.S. Amescus was going to go down and confront this individual, to a certain degree, that is her right to do. But there was definitely no need for her to go out of her way to make sure that the thing was nice and public, to make sure that she was garnering political capital off of it. And even though she had every right to be upset about it, she definitely had absolutely no right to involve Antifa, knowing that they were likely to go up there, do damage to his store, possibly assault him. I mean, God knows that Antifa has definitely, these people have definitely, they have not shied away from assaulting senior citizens. We'll say that much. Now, it does seem to have turned out that if you could say that anybody actually won in this particular situation, and that's not a word that I'm eager to use, but if anybody won in this particular situation, it does turn out to be Mr. Suture. There was a rally that had been threatened at his store that these Antifa individuals had said that they were going to show up, and this T.S. Amescus, she had kind of organized this rally. And then on the day of the rally, 400 people showed up to protest, to counter-protest against them in Mr. Suture's favor. And only about 4 or so people showed up to support her, and so in the end, she wound up calling that whole thing off. Now, is Don Suture going to be left alone going forward? That remains to be seen. Should he be harassed or assaulted? No, I definitely don't think so. But I do definitely think that there are people who should have every right to tell him exactly what they think of this sign that he hung up in his business.